This season, Chelsea are being widely viewed as a serious contender for the Premier League title. However, their season did not get off to the ideal start, a rather flat and disappointing 0-0 draw against Crystal Palace. Chelsea was simply too slow on the ball, but Crystal Palace deserve a lot of credit because defensively, they were excellent. Now, despite Crystal Palace putting in a really strong defensive performance, Chelsea still had a lot of the ball. Just look at these possession numbers, they were dominant in terms of possession, and the real question was whether or not they can break down this Crystal Palace team, and of course it finished 0-0. So the answer to that question is no, they couldn't break down Crystal Palace. But what we need to look at today is the shape that Chelsea were trying to use to try and do the job, and how Crystal Palace did such a good job of stopping them. So we'll start off with Chelsea's shape on the ball. Typically on paper they line up in a 4-2-3-1 shape, however on the pitch it looks very different. Reece James moves himself into a back three alongside the two centre backs, while Cucurella, the left back, actually moves inside into midfield. Caicedo goes into a sort of holding pivot position, whilst Enzo Fernandez moves a little bit further forward, and the wingers try and move a little bit wider to provide some width. So we can see a clear back three along the back line there. We can then see this little diamond shape that Chelsea are trying to create in midfield, and then across the front line we have the front three. The problem was Palace were ready to stop them. Now, the reason why Crystal Palace were able to stop Chelsea was because they had a lot of numbers behind the ball, but they were aggressive with their positioning, and that is the key. You see, Crystal Palace line up in a back five formation when they don't have the ball. That's 5 defenders across the back line. They then only have 2 midfielders, and then they have a front three. Typically, this is a formation that we see as passive, a shape that struggles to get pressure on the ball. But that's only the case if you don't play like Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace are very good at using their pressing triggers to jump out, to force Chelsea into turnovers and eventually win the ball. And the players that we are really looking at are the likes of Eze, Mateta and also Guehi. Because what these guys do is move into different positions to block passing lanes. So let's say someone like Reece James is on the ball in this position here, and he desperately wants to thread a ball through to someone like Cole Palmer in this position here. In these moments, Eze will do his work to make sure that that pass isn't available. James wants to go through to this position here, so Eze is going to tuck himself in a little bit narrower to block that passing lane through the middle of the pitch. We're also going to see something similar from Mateta up front. He's not going to go and stand on one of the centre-backs. Instead, he was almost shadow marking Caicedo. So every time Caicedo moved into a different position, Mateta would make sure that he was blocking that passing lane. Caicedo may move again into this area here. Mateta is going to move across, once again preventing that pass into the midfielder. And that also happened on the other side of the pitch as well. So Caicedo may be on this side and the ball is with Chalobah. When he's trying to play in there, he can't because Mateta is doing such a good job of stopping him. The other key battle to note is Guehi up against Cole Palmer, and this is where that aggression comes from. Palace, yes, they get a lot of players behind the ball, but they don't just sit in their own box. They want to try and jump forward to overturn possession. So yes, it's defensive, but I don't think it's overly passive. Particularly when the ball was on this side of the pitch with the likes of Chalobah or Cucurella or even Caicedo. Cole Palmer loves to drift into a deeper midfield position in an attempt to try and find some space. And that space is potentially there. Crystal Palace only have 2 midfielders. Hughes and Adam Wharton, 2 good players, but it's only 2 of them. And that means if Chelsea are playing with 4, they're going to have superiority at some point, unless the centre-backs are willing to be aggressive. And Guehi was, stepping out from the backline towards Cole Palmer, trusting his ability to be aggressive, but also to be able to cover the space behind him. And this is why Crystal Palace was so good. Now, just to prove that I'm not completely waffling, we're going to go through a couple of sequences of this sort of playing out on the pitch and really showcasing Crystal Palace's good defensive ability. So first of all, we can see Chelsea in that shape that we are talking about, the 3-4-3, but it's a diamond in the middle of the pitch. Or you may even call this a 3-1-3, that depends on how you interpret it. But we can see that this was something that they used in different spells of the game. 18 minutes later here, they are still in the same shape. They are in this 3-4-3 diamond. As for Crystal Palace, they were in a different shape, but what's important was how narrow the pitch was. Chelsea in their diamond felt a little bit tight, narrow, compact, and they didn't stretch Crystal Palace enough. In terms of Palace, it was that 5-2-3 that we're talking about. We can't actually see half of the back 5 here. That's how deep they are initially, but what is quite clear is the 2 in midfield and then the 3 up front. They do incredibly important jobs, or certainly in this game they did. When Reece James has got the ball in a position over here like this, we know he wants to move that ball through the lines. He's a progressive player. He's someone who plays with aggressive intent to move the ball forward for his team. But importantly for Palace, Eze was switched on, and it was the same for Sarr on the right side as well. They were constantly looking over their shoulders to figure out where the Chelsea players were. Once seeing where the Chelsea players were located, they would then make minor adjustments, just stepping half a yard to their right or to their left to cut off that progressive passing lane. And this is why Chelsea couldn't move the ball forward through the middle of the pitch. Look at this passing graph here. No chance of moving the ball through the centre. Now, as we discussed earlier, the other reason why they couldn't move the ball centrally was because of Mateta. We can see if Chelsea want to move that ball into Caicedo, they can't because Mateta is in the way. As the ball moves across to the left-hand side, this is still in the same phase of play. Mateta has once again adjusted. Caicedo, despite moving positions, Chelsea, despite moving the ball, can't actually find their way into midfield. Now, just a few seconds later, we see Chelsea's attempt at solving this problem. One of the diamond players drops a little bit deeper. This time it was Enzo Fernandez. He moved high and then looked to drop into the space in an attempt to overload Crystal Palace in midfield. But the important thing is that Guehi is willing to follow him. Guehi also done an amazing job on Cole Palmer throughout the match. Every time that Palmer would drop deeper, Guehi would just follow him and not really give him anywhere to go. And as a result, the only way for Chelsea to really get anywhere was, as we can see, not through the middle, but instead to move the ball out wide. But that was the plan for Crystal Palace. They wanted Chelsea to go out wide because the best defender in world football is the touchline. You cannot dribble past the touchline, and that means that Crystal Palace can force Chelsea into a zone, go over and suffocate them, and then look to overturn possession from those positions. Now, once Crystal Palace win the ball back in these areas, we know they come to life. Someone like Eze is able to get on the ball, and now the quick transition is on. Eze is an amazing ball carrier. He showed some real glimpses of magic in this game. Is it his last game for Crystal Palace? I don't know. It would be a real shame if it is, but it was a bright performance. If it is to be his last, he did a very good job, and he tried to do everything to help his team forward, and that involves quick moving attacks. Eze carrying the ball, dropping it off to someone like Mateta. Mateta's got excellent hold-up ability, the ability to bring in other players like Adam Wharton. And then when you've got a passer like that in your midfield, with runners like Sarr, but also the two wing-backs outside, this is when Crystal Palace could have done some serious damage. And I honestly think if Crystal Palace had executed better, they could have won this game. Overall, it wasn't a terrible Chelsea performance. It's just that they were a bit too static. They didn't take advantage of the space. For example, when Guehi come out, could Pedro have span in behind into that space on a more regular basis? Perhaps because the space was there, but they didn't do it. They didn't move the ball quick enough, and Crystal Palace were excellent from a defensive point of view, and therefore, for me, they deserve at least a point. It was a masterclass in how you use the 3-4-3 with aggressive centre-backs and also wide players. Crystal Palace deserve their point. Chelsea will be frustrated, but it's a long old season. There's plenty of time for them to adapt. But in terms of for today, there's nothing left to talk about. So thank you guys very much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.